Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Continuous Quality Improvement tutorial series, where we are going to cover important topics and answer frequently asked questions regarding implementing a CQI cycle at your club. My name is Rachel Keener. I'm a Director of Quality Improvement at BGCA. I worked with the YPQA and CQI at a club before coming to BGCA, and I am passionate about making these meaningful tools as accessible as possible to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Clark Hill. I am also a Director of Quality Improvement at BGCA. I have been working with CQI systems and the YPQA in various settings throughout the country. I am super excited to be able to share all of this information that we've been able to learn. Thank you so much for joining us. Now let's get started.
So hi, everybody. Welcome to Data Collection for CQI, part of our Continuous Quality Improvement tutorial series. Some brief housekeeping before we get started. All of the resources mentioned in this video can be found on the CQI Toolkit at cqitoolkit.org. If you have questions after watching this video, you can email quality@bgca.org or pqa@bgca.org. Or if you'd like some one-on-one time, you can schedule a quality consultation by visiting the CQI Toolkit's Prepare page and submit a request found at the bottom. Here's the link for your reference, and let's get started looking at objectives. We are going to understand the basics of data collection for CQI, learn strategies to think about holistic data collection, explore different types of data, their use and importance, and really try to drive home how beneficial it can be to get as big of a picture as possible of what's going on at your club. And then finally, we'll review data resources available from BGCA. So something I'd like to take the time to have you all think about before we get started is who collects your data? Is it your frontline staff, your front desk person as soon as youth walk in? Maybe you collect data just once a year during NYOI. Oftentimes the folks who spend all of their time and energy collecting our data are people who are closest to our club and closest to the youth we're working with. Then think about who reviews your data and who uses it. If your experience is anything like mine, when your data gets collected, it gets moved up to an administrative office, maybe site directors look at it, and they use it for organizational planning. But very rarely we find that our data gets back into the hands of our frontline staff who are doing all this energy to collect it and who can really do the most to make changes in their own practice to improve the club. So the question I like to start out with is, who is our data for? What are we doing with it? Is it for funders? Are we using it to justify what we do, to raise money, to talk to our board about what goes on at the club? Certainly all those things are important to the health and life of a nonprofit and a club, but we have found over our years working with data use, with continuous quality improvement, that it really is exponentially more effective when you balance that out with getting data back into the hands of folks who can really use it to make meaning of their own practice, to understand what's happening at their club, and really make changes for improvement in the future. I call this grassroots data, making sure that anything that is collected gets back to the hands of the folks that are most affected by it. So I'm going to introduce a concept that you were first talked to about in our Intro to CQI series, which if you're following this series in order, should have been the first tool that you utilized. And what this is a logic model, if you will, that describes their path to outcomes, like what we actually want to do with young people in our program. And it starts with quality instruction and quality content. So is the information that your staff giving intriguing? Is it useful? Is it of high quality? And are their staff practices also of quality? When we have high quality instruction and high quality in content, that leads to greater levels of engagement by our members at the club. So we see members coming more often. We see them being more engaged when they're there, asking more questions, being more present, participating in a greater variety of areas. All this makes sense if you've been in youth work for a while, right? Like if it's good, folks will come. When young people come to our club more often, they have a greater opportunity to practice some of the skills, beliefs, practices that clubs are trying to impart on our young people, like success in navigating difficult relationships, being productive in school, having healthy habits around like hygiene, nutrition, exercise, all of those things. The more often that youth come and participate in our programs, build relationships with our staff, the greater opportunities they have to practice those skills and beliefs in a club setting. And oftentimes you'll hear this referred to as dosage, etc. When youth have multiple and extended opportunities to practice those skills, beliefs, concepts that the club tries to impart on their youth, they have a higher chance to transfer those skills and beliefs to areas outside the club. And ultimately, this is what Boys and Girls Clubs is all about, right? Like, yes, we want our young people to be successful in our own walls and with our own staff, but ultimately we want them to move on from the club as young adults and be able to apply those skills to future relationships, to college, to career, and their current school setting, etc. And so what we're doing by outlining this for you is showing you that at the very beginning of this logic model, of the quest model, we call it, focusing on what you can control, that quality content and quality instruction, is going to help you reach your mission even more effectively than you have been before. And the way that we check whether or not we have quality instruction and quality content is implementing a cycle of continuous quality improvement to make sure that we're doing what we want to be doing in our buildings, with our staff, with our young people. So CQI is a cyclical process designed to explore opportunities to improve quality. You do that by analyzing data that has been collected at the club over a period of time. Your staff then develop a plan to improve, and then leadership and sort of your own staff team provides staff with the tools to implement those improvement plans and make the changes they need to improve the quality of their club. This CQI process helps clubs build and maintain quality programs, ultimately leading to greater outcomes for kids. So in this training, we are focusing specifically on how to collect data for CQI. So this has been the whole process of CQI that I've just outlined for you, but really focusing in on that assess phase. How are we making sure that the data that we're collecting gives us a big enough picture of what our club is all about? And the way I want us to think about that is through data buckets. Sometimes we refer to these as data categories, but what we do is, instead of thinking about data as like one single source of data, so your National Youth Outcomes Initiative survey results, your attendance data from KidTrax or My Club Hub, or what have you, we are going to separate those data into different categories so we can make sure that we're getting a holistic picture. And those categories are quality practices, so what are your staff doing? Attendance and participation, club experiences, and youth outcomes. Our first bucket or category is quality practices. What this does is assess staff practices such as interactions between young people and adults in the program, incorporating youth voice, creating a youth-centered learning environment. And it does that by using a research-validated tool, such as the Youth Program Quality Assessment, APAS and NISION are some other ones. The YPQA, the Youth PQA, is the one that BGCA has adopted and is providing you resources for. So if you don't have a way to measure the quality of your staff practice, we encourage you to take our PQA Basics course or our Getting Started with Assessment course to learn a little bit more about how to get some of this data if you don't have it already. Next, we move on to attendance and participation. So this information tells you who is coming to your club and how often is the simplest way to put it. Oftentimes for clubs, this looks like annual membership, average daily attendance, program-specific participation data. So like who is coming to Smart Girls, who's doing your STEM stuff, and all of that. It can also be broken down demographically. This data is often data that we collect without thinking about it, but it's enormously useful when paired with everything else we're looking at. Next, we have youth outcomes. This is often what we put on grant reports, on sort of like funding proposals. And what it does is measure the success of key program indicators. So oftentimes we see clubs talking about how much success they've had in increasing school attendance. Maybe you have a literacy program that measures like learned skills. What are youth getting out of coming to your club? Most often we see clubs get this information from their NYOI outcomes report that talks about school attendance, about exercise, about whether or not they plan to go on to college and career. It's that sort of thing. But we also see clubs have this information come from a variety of sources. So we might see it in measuring pre and post tests that are program specific, like your Passport to Manhood pre-post test, your Money Matters pre-post tests. Clubs might collect report cards of young folks in their program. I've seen some clubs measure social emotional learning or social emotional development skills. That would certainly be included in this youth outcomes section. But it's basically anything that describes what we are trying to do with kids, like what are we working on? And finally, that leads us to club experiences. Sometimes you'll see this bucket or category referred to as program experiences, but we're talking about the same thing. So this is any data that tells you how participants, members, parents, and other stakeholders experience your club and the programs and activities within it. Most clubs get this information also from NYOI, but in a different section. It's the club experience data. So it's any information in NYOI that talks about how youth are feeling, right? So do they have a sense of belonging? Are they having fun? Do they feel both physically and emotionally safe? Anything in your club experience data falls under this data bucket. You might also use information from parent surveys about how parents, guardians are feeling about your club, what they like, what they don't. You can also use data from pulse checks and listening sessions. So when we put those all together, we get a whole picture of what our club looks like. And that gives us some real information to be able to focus and identify where we would like to structure our improvement plans. So I'm going to review briefly. We start with the beginning of that quest model with our quality practices. The very foundation are our staff running programs in a high quality way. And we use those tools you see mentioned on the screen here. The YPQA, you can use APTO, NISAN, any other one that is maybe local to your situation. But again, BGCA uses the YPQA. Then we get some information on engagement, right? Like how often are kids coming to the club? What are they participating in? Who are we reaching? And we get that from our kid tracks, our My Club Hub, our Vision, our Comet, who's coming, how often. Then we get to how are you feeling at the club? Like, are they feeling safe? Do they have what they need to participate? What are they getting out of it? And that's all of our NYOI club experience data. In our youth outcomes bucket, we're looking at our NYOI report, school grades and attendance, program pre-post tests. Maybe you have statewide testing scores that you get. The sort of the ultimate, like, what are we able to do to improve the lives and well-being of young folks? So in order to put this into context in your own setting, I'd like you to think about what data does your club collect? It's really common for clubs to not have all of these buckets totally full yet. Most clubs have their NYOI, their attendance data, and maybe they're just getting started with some quality practice data like the YPQA. Looking at this tool that we have for you, you can find this on the CQI Toolkit website. It's called our data collection worksheet. We've made this to help you think about, like, how do you measure quality practice? How are you measuring attendance and participation? And if you don't have data in those categories, how could you measure it? Do you want to get on the CQI Toolkit and look at the youth program quality assessment trainings that we have. See if you can start to implement that at your club. Is there another tool that's more local to you that would be useful? Do you notice when you're filling this out that one bucket is way more full or one category is way larger than the other? Are we putting all of our emphasis in measuring outcomes? Do we have our literacy measures, our social emotional learning measures, but we really don't know whether or not our staff are running quality programs? We have found over our years of working with organizations on this work that when these 4 categories are full and filled out evenly, you're not doing too much in one and too little in another, that clubs really find that they have the information that they need to make some useful and well-rounded improvement plans. The CQI Toolkit is where you can go to get all of the information that I talked about today in this video, including the data collection worksheet, which I think should be your very next step in leaving this video if you are wanting to dive into what data collection looks like for a healthy continuous quality improvement cycle. And finally, we'll close out with a little reflection question. After watching this video, what change would you like to make in your own data collection strategy and why? What resonated with you? So take a second to sort of jot that down or just hold that in your head. What did you get out of this video? What are your next steps in making sure that your club has a healthy data collection strategy for a continuous quality improvement cycle? Thank you all for listening today and looking forward to having you in future sessions.